Hi everybody, welcome to class today. Today we're going to begin in section 2.1. Just so you guys know, we're going to combine chapters 2 and 3 just because there's a lot of stuff in chapter 2 that we're not going to go over just because there's better uses of our time. So, but we are going to take a few of the more important sections out of chapter 2 and then we'll kind of just roll into chapter 3, one right after the other. So today we're going to talk about 2.1, talking about the real number line. Okay, so we're going to spend the whole time talking about numbers and different types of numbers and stuff. So as on the board here, you can see we've got a number line. So everything back here in the red, okay, this is what we call, oh, not zero. This is our negative numbers. And on the right of 0, going on for forever and ever, these are what we call positive numbers. And hopefully you have seen that before, nothing new there. And 0 is neither positive or negative, it is just neutral, so that's not going to carry a sign. Today, we're going to start talking about different types of numbers. Okay, so right away when you start thinking about numbers, you go way back when you were just a small child. What was the whole point of numbers? Is we wanted to be able to count things. So that's where we're going to start here. And we have the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, those are what we call the whole numbers. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, all the numbers you count by, plus 0 is what we call the whole numbers. The next type of number that we're going to look at is called the integers. And integers are what I just showed you on the last slide in that number line. So it is positive and negative numbers. So negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. And it'll keep going in both directions, both positive and negative. So the integers just allows us to have negatives. And notice that all of the whole numbers are also part of the integer. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3 in the whole numbers as well. So if a number is a whole number, it is also an integer. And the last set of numbers that we're going to talk about are what is called the rational numbers. Okay? The rational numbers, the way I remember these is they are fractional. Rational, fractional sound alike. That's how I keep those straight. So any number that can be written as a fraction. So for instance, if you see 3/7, or maybe 1/2. Okay, those are the easy ones. Okay, there's also decimals that can fall into rational. Okay. If the decimal terminates or ends, terminates means end, okay? So for instance, 0.7, okay? That decimal ends, that is a terminating decimal. We can write that as a fraction. Also, if the number or that decimal repeats, so 0.54 repeating, there we go, decimal point didn't show up, okay? 0.54 repeating, that is absolutely a number that we can write as a fraction, okay? So it repeats, 54, 54, 54, rational number. Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do on your homework today is I'm going to ask you to classify numbers as whole numbers, real number, or rational numbers, or integers, okay? The reason I set this up the way that I did is the whole numbers are all part of the integers. The integers can all be written as a fraction. So, for instance, if you think of the number 3, you can write that as a fraction as 3 over 1, you can write it as a fraction. It is rational. So when I ask you to classify them, find which circle closest to the middle that it falls into, and everything else will be outside of that circle. It'll also fall into that. So if it is a whole number, it is also an integer and a rational number. If it's an integer, it is also rational. And if it's just rational, it doesn't have only rational, then it is only rational. Next, we're going to write the following in increasing order. Okay, so pay attention. Increasing. Okay, in order to do that, we're going to use a number line to help us. Okay. I look and I see, well, -2 is the only, oh, I have 2 negative numbers. Okay. So, and you can kind of get a feel for this. Okay. And I'm just going to go from -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can even throw in a 5 just for good measure. Now, one thing that might help you guys, okay, we have regular numbers, no fractions, no decimals, -2, 4, 0. Okay, then I have 1.5 or 1.5. Okay, and then I have half as a fraction and -3/2 as a fraction. One thing that might help you guys, get them all to the same. So what a lot of Algebra 1 students do is they will divide that out on their calculator to get, for instance, 1/2 is 0.5. Okay, that helps them. And -3/2 would be -1.5. So in order to help them order these a little easier, that might help you. When we put these on the number line, though, okay, we are going to label where they are, and we're going to put the number that we're given. Okay, that way we're all talking the same language here. So -2, that's right on the number line. All we got to do is put a point and write -2. 4, again, another number right on the number line. Put a 4, put a point, label it as 4. 0, another easy one on the number line, label that as 0. Now I get to 1.5, okay? There is no 1.5 on my number line, so what I have to do is I have to make my very best guess as to where that is. I know it's in between 1 and 2, and it's going to be halfway in between there, and I'm going to label this as 1.5. Okay? Same thing with 1/2 or 0.5, okay? In between 0 and 1, and I'm going to label that as half because that's what I was given. Now, the tricky one, -3/2 or -1.5. Well, 1.5 is in between 1 and 2, so it needs it to be in between -1 and -2 if it's -1.5. So I've gone 1 away from 0, and I need to go another half, and I end up with -3/2 right there. So to list them in increasing order, okay, I start with the number farthest to the left, -2, and I just work my way to the right. So I go -3/2, 0, 1/2, 1.5, and 4. And there I have it in increasing order. In your homework, it's going to tell you to write something along the lines of, you're going to write an inequality 2 different ways. Okay, what they're saying is, if I just pick 2 of my numbers, okay, I'm just going to pick -2 and 4. I would say that negative 2 is less than 4, or I could write it as 4 is greater than negative 2. Okay, same thing, just flipped it around. And hopefully that isn't too hard for you guys. So if you get to something in your homework where it's kind of phrased weird, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but this right here in red is what they're looking for, is they're trying to write those inequalities. All right, now we're going to talk about opposites of numbers. Okay, so opposites are just two numbers that are the same distance from the origin, but on different sides of the origin. So if I look at here, okay, if I look at positive 3 right here, okay, that's 3 spots away from the origin, 0. So it's 3 to the right, so I need a number 3 to the left. Okay, and it's just going to flip that sign on it, is really all that opposites are going to do. So the opposite of negative 13 then just becomes a positive 13. Okay, so just change the signs on it. Absolute value is very closely related to that. You guys have seen absolute value before. Okay, hopefully you guys remember that absolute value turns everything positive. Because all we're asking is how far away from 0 is the number inside those absolute value bars. So if I look at the absolute value of 2.3, how far away from 0 is 2.3? Well, it's 2.3. Get that decimal in there. Okay, so again, turns everything positive. Now, negative 0.5, how far away from 0 is it? It is 0.5 away from it. Again, turns everything positive. Now, this next one, I have 2 negatives. So ignore the negative outside the absolute value for right now. Okay, the absolute value of negative 8 is a positive 8. However, since this negative out here is out here, this says take the absolute value and whatever you get, make it negative. Okay? So this is the negative of the absolute value. So absolute value does turn everything positive, so it turns the negative 8 inside positive, but because there's that negative outside as well, it says take it, make it positive, but then make it negative again. It guarantees that absolute value stays negative. Okay, so be careful on that. Pay attention to that for your homework. Last thing, couple of equations here. Okay, now when you see absolute values, okay, especially in equations like we have here, absolute value of x is equal to 7, absolute value of x is equal to negative 5. Okay, you're going to have 2 answers. Okay, and that's okay. Because if I take the absolute value of what number could give me 7, well, the absolute value of 7 is 7. Or, because absolute value turns everything positive, I can say that x is equal to negative 7. Okay? And I can check that. All I have to do is plug in negative 7 in for x there. Is the absolute value of negative 7, 7? It absolutely is. Absolute value turns everything positive. With these, be careful. Make sure that you have 2 answers for both of those, because you could have positives and negatives inside those absolute value bars. If I look at the second one, the absolute value of x is equal to negative 5. Absolute value of what number is going to give me negative 5? Hopefully, you guys pick up that since absolute value turns everything positive, okay, and there are no negatives out front, I could get that if I had a negative out front of there, okay, but that's not the situation. If I had negative absolute value of x, is equal to -5, I could get there, but that's not going to work in this case. Okay, I just have the regular absolute value of x is equal to -5. Absolute value can't be negative, so we have no solution. No number that I can plug in for x right here will be negative after I take the absolute value of it. So we just write no solution, or if you guys want a symbol for that, the symbol is just a circle with a line through it that means no solution. All right, here's your homework for today. We'll check this when I get back to class tomorrow. If you guys have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll do my best to answer those. Otherwise, stop by sometime and we can sit down together and get you squared around. Other than that, hope you have a good day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.